Hello and welcome, and let this be a great hour or so of the very first bonus episode of our new history podcast, Bloody Heart of Europe. My name is Vasek. So nice to, not exactly see you, because I'm seeing a camera right now, but you do see me at least, unless you're listening to us, which in that case, just disregard everything I said. And across the table from me is my good friend and colleague, Alžběta.
Ahoy.
Hello, Alžběta.
Hello.
Did you say ahoy?
Yeah, I went for Czech.
Because that is who we are. We are Czech. We are Czech people, and that is among the reasons we chose to do this. Because if you've listened already to our first regular episode about King Wenceslas of Bohemia, then you already know that the podcast is somewhat focused on the medieval Czech lands or the Kingdom of Bohemia. Let's just say that Bohemia and Czechia, as well as Bohemian and Czech, they are synonyms.
Also Czech Republic, that's the same too.
So
many names.
We are going to use these terms quite interchangeably, even though Bohemian is obviously the more, ancient term. So we wouldn't exactly call ourselves Bohemian, but our heritage is Bohemian. Alžběta, that is, that's correct.
That's correct.
Okay. Since I already, touched upon who we are, let's also say that apart from being Czech, we are also not historians, which is quite important. We are doing this because we are huge fans of history and because we have some experience with doing this sort of work. We're both quite experienced podcasters, mainly here in Czechia. But let me add that Alžběta is actually, at the very least, a student of history, meaning she is actually studying for her degree at the university. So,
right now.
Yeah.
Right
so
now.
She is the capacity here, and I'm the guy with the fun questions she can answer in an also fun way.
I would just add, we're both from gaming world. We are, or we started as gaming journalists, and we are just fans of history. But I think there is like a little bit of, because we are fans of history, I think we can sometimes, have these like fun theories that like normal historians don't like. Just like, what if, or, just like giving like a little bit of some flair.
I mean, there's flair, but at the same time, we are not making stuff up, yeah?
No.
So we are actually trying to present real history in a fun way. So we are not trying to deceive you or anything. So that's that. That's who we are, and we will bring you more details about our creative process and about how exactly we do this and what's our background personally in one of the future bonus episodes. But this episode is actually dedicated to the main character of the regular episode you've already heard or listened to, and that is King Wenceslas. This is the structure of our bonus episodes. We will always have a bonus episode that somewhat, broadens the topic we prepared for you in the regular episode, and there's always more to tell. The regular episodes have very limited runtime, so we are trying to pack only the most interesting things into the narrative. And here in the bonuses, this is the place where we actually, where we can bring out the juicy details and add some context and, enlighten you if that is what you seek.
Yeah, maybe even have a conversation with you. Maybe not like in real time, but definitely like if you have some questions or comments, keep it going, and we will take a look at it and answer it in future. Yeah,
we are aware, obviously, that this topic we've chosen is quite niche in the context of world history and Anglophone history in the English-speaking world. But all the more reason for you to ask and for us to answer. So, we're looking forward to it. And let's open this episode without further ado, and not adieu, and let's talk about Wenceslas. But first, before we talk about Wenceslas himself, I think it would be prudent to actually add some context, Elżbieta, because this is the first episode, and many of our listeners, I would assume, are jumping into a completely new environment, speaking about, the kingdoms of Central Europe and the Holy Roman Empire, and even the timeline or the era we're actually trying to tell our story in. So when exactly is all of this the great story of war and rebellion and romance and murder we're trying to tell?
When we are on the history timeline.
Yes.
So right now we are in 1380s, somewhat till 90s. In 14th century, there was a lot of things were happening. One of the biggest ones was 100 Years' War.
Yep.
We mentioned it in our main episode. That is as the name suggests, it took quite a long time. So it slightly encompasses the whole time that we want to present this podcast for you on that timeline, where we exactly starting 1360s, where when Wenceslas was born, and we want to finish somewhat 1460s, 70s. So it is exactly it kind of lines up these two things.
Yeah. And the 100 Years' War obviously was fought more westwards between England and France. It was their great dynastic struggle, and it doesn't really enter our story primarily. It's more of a background that sometimes, has some effect on the stuff that happens in our story. But it is very useful, I think, to have it in the back of your mind, because the technology is similar to what you may know from the movies about the 100 Years' War. The society is similar. So we are in an age where there are still armored knights on their horses who rule over their peasant underlings. But there are also new and fascinating developments in both society and warfare. The English longbow is going to take over the battlefield. That's somewhat mirrored in what's happening in our story, because we will also see that the formerly invincible armored knights are not as invincible as everybody thought. And there are many connective points between those
events.
Stories.
Yeah.
Events. Yeah.
There was also happening exactly 14th century was very busy on events. One of them, and one of the biggest ones, was Black Death, which was this massive pandemic of plague.
Yep.
You probably heard about it. Absolutely massacred a lot of population. In the early years when it happened, it basically decimated the whole quarter of a population of Western Europe. What is interesting for our story, it didn't hit Bohemia that hard. It actually didn't come to Bohemia until 80s, so which basically was 30 years later. But
after the birth of Wenceslas, it's 20 years, right?
20 years after, yeah.
And 30 years after it began.
It began in Western Europe, yeah. And but it was exactly when it happened, when it first showed up, it never went away. It's one of those things plague was here, and it pretty much is still here till today. It's just not that deadly as it was after. Thanks.
Antibiotics.
Exactly.
Oh yeah.
Thanks modern medicine. So.
If only they knew. But yeah, so that's what's west of our main area of operation, because yes, we are focusing on Bohemia, on Germany, and the surrounding countries, basically. But you could also obviously look to the south, to the Italian city-states, where the Renaissance is already in full swing, basically. You could look to the east, where the Polish are waging war against the crusading Teutonic Order. So yes, many wars, many developments, and many stories to be told. Our story is just one of many, and it will be interwoven with some other stories from time to time. But yeah, our focus is this.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think like it might be helpful. I have like a list of media that could give you exactly, like we were talking about like 14th century, we were talking about knights, we were talking about Renaissance, but to give you more of something visual that you can imagine, and you can look it up online and be like, oh, okay, I know where I am exactly on that timeline.
Yep.
It's on that like earliest end, I think, on that timeline that we were talking, which is like 1340s, 1350s. It's a book and a TV show, World Without End by Ken Follett.
Yeah, I love the author.
He's great. Yeah, Pillars of the Earth.
Yeah.
That was earlier, but yeah. And then obviously all the Shakespeare plays like Richard II, Henry V. I love Hollow Crown, that TV show, which is a rendition of these stories. But also we have, like, for example, the movie The King.
Oh yeah, Timothée Chalamet.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing. Not exactly historically truthful, but it's a fun movie.
It's a fun movie. Speaking of not quite historically truthful, but being a fun movie, it's a Knight's Tale. Amazing movie with Heath Ledger, and it's like around the same period too. Last Duel.
Yeah, that's very close to where we're actually beginning our story, because Wenceslas was like 20 to 30 when the great duel was fought. So that's also a fun movie.
Yeah, and in the future, not in this episode, but in the future, we will get also in the period of Wars of the Roses, which means that, for example, if you know TV show White Queen, it's also a book. So the White Queen, it's exactly the story of Elizabeth Woodville and Edward IV. And so we wouldn't just talk about, Western Europe and England. I would also mention two things. One is Heirs to the Land, which is a Netflix show also based on a book, and it's set in Barcelona in Spain. And the other one is Medici, which it's like set in 1429, so that is a little bit later than we are right now. But yeah.
Okay. But Alžběta, you already mentioned that our background is video game journalism or like commentary, and there are also video games that are set in the era and sometimes even the very place we're actually talking about. And I mean the greatest inspiration, also for basically even making this show is Kingdom Come Deliverance, right?
Yeah, Kingdom Come Deliverance. I think it used to have it in the name, which was the year like 1402. But I think they dropped it eventually. They just
Too nerdy.
Yeah, they just kept like Kingdom Come Deliverance. But as the first one and the second one, both of them exactly, they are set in pretty much the same time, or like the same period, definitely. Geographically, it's set exactly in Kingdom of Bohemia.
You will meet so many characters that are from our story when you're playing those games. So
you get also a little bit some spoilers. Sorry about that.
Yeah, we're trying to warn you when that happens, where, for example, an important character from the video game dies a horrible death or something like that. But yeah, it can happen.
Yeah, and but even if you're not gamer and you are curious, I would definitely recommend you to look it up online and just check like how it looks, so you can get the feel. You can see the clothes, you can see exactly the type of weapons, you can see how the cities looked or the villages looked. I think like it gives you a really nice idea, because the game they tried to make it as much historically accurate as they could.
Yeah, and I think that it's an invaluable tool to actually immerse yourself in the era and in the place, because they did a great job on that, and those are really, really good games. So there are also some others in the notes here. we have got, for example, Manor Lords, which is for those of you who like to build their own settlements and villages, and it's really fun to see the village spring from nothing and build a functioning little society. Also, obviously, I think a legendary series of games, Assassin's Creed 2, centered on Ezio Auditore. Obviously to the south, but still the same general era.
It's again it's like the end of our story somewhat. It's not this episode. It's gonna be more like episode 10 or 12, but it's set in 1450s, which again it's still the same period. So it is kind of interesting to maybe see that in Italy it was like they were a little bit ahead, at least culturally. So
yeah, they were. But we will see during our story that it's not exactly as if Germany and Bohemia was an absolute backwater, but it was a dark time in many ways. So
yeah, they're definitely the years that we're gonna cover. They were in the best when it comes to the culture.
Yeah, and then there will be many other priorities for the people there. For example, how best to kill their neighbors because of slight differences in religious belief. Always fun.
Or maybe survive.
Maybe survive. Yeah. All right. So I think we've got our listeners hooked.
I hope so. It was like a little bit of info dump. Sorry for this. It's more just like to get you, more familiar exactly like what we were talking about. It's just not, you have some like visual reference to it.
Yep. Because this sword might not be enough. So yeah. All right. So let's dive into the episode proper because there's so much more to tell than we were able to tell. About Wenceslas, about the beginning of his reign, about Bohemia, and about the beginning of this great story that will end in one of the great religious revolutions of medieval times. And I think that the person we should start with, albeit briefly, because he is not the main character of this episode, is actually Wenceslas' father, because we are mentioning Charles IV of the Holy Roman Empire quite a lot. We I think consider him, or we told you that he is one of the best emperors that ever ruled the Holy Roman Empire, and he was fantastic, right?
By the way, it just reminds me because you messaged me. I don't know where you read it, if it was Wikipedia or something, but you read some comment. It's like, oh, he was one of the better emperors or something, and like we both got so offended because he is so beloved. It's like every child in Czech Republic knows Charles IV, and we have him as this absolute great monarch. So just having him reduced to like, he was
all right. Yeah, that's disgusting. That's propaganda for the Ottonians or whatever. But yeah, he was amazing. Not only because of all the stuff we already talked about in the episode. He built a lot of stuff. He was a great expander of the realm, not only through warfare but mainly through diplomacy and other peaceful means. And he also did that while being a cool guy who, rode his horse in tourneys and.
He's absolutely fascinating character. I hope that we will, or like the plan definitely for it is to make some episodes that would be specifically about Charles and his father, John of Bohemia, because both of them are extremely fascinating. I think also because I love that family drama that like sometimes like comes through, and their relationship was extremely complicated.
Yeah.
And very up and down. It's like it's a proper like soap opera type of relationship. And exactly, there is like a lot of stuff that I think is great. For example, Charles, as you mentioned, like he rode into tournaments. He broke his neck in one of the tournaments and actually survived it. And it was one of the greatest mysteries that was uncovered, that this actually happened after centuries later when they did research on his body, and they found out that he had like this weird injury. And so there's a lot to cover, but in a different episode.
Exactly. So yeah, this episode belongs to his son, to his eldest son, Wenceslas. He's you already know so much about him from our normal episode, from our what do we call it? Main episode. Thank you. This nomenclature, it's gonna be the death of me. But so Wenceslas, the king who we have seen crowned several times in our episode, Bitka.
Yeah.
Bitka, by the way, is like an affectionate version of the name Alžběta.
Yes,
so
yes.
that's who I'm. That's why I'm sometimes using a different name.
Exactly. We love it because like you have 3 names for Czech Republic, you have 3 names for Vašek here. Actually, his name is Václav, which is the same as Wenceslas. You have all these different names. Get used to it. Sorry.
Yeah. I think that hopefully our personal charisma will be enough to. To make you bear with us through all the names. So I can imagine that for some listeners, it could be a bit overwhelming to have so many coronations in the very beginning of his life, because he was very young in both those cases. Yeah. So could we maybe talk for a bit about these?
The differences and the first one.
Yes,
and
exactly.
Yeah. I remember when we wrote the script, it was when we were working on the first episode, it was like one of the worries. It's like, okay, how do we actually explain to people that there are 2 different coronations? Yeah. It's like, if you are a king, it doesn't mean that you have like a blank check and you're just like, oh, you're a king. There are different tiers and different kingdoms and stuff like that. So the first coronation that we talked about is exactly the one which is the toddler coronation, let's call it that way.
Yes.
And that one was weird in that sense that you have in the history, it happened that you have a baby that was being crowned as a baby. It's not super uncommon. It's not also very, it's not like that would happen every single time.
Yeah.
But
it's not shocking, but
yeah.
It's unusual, and it's especially unusual in this case, right?
In this case was super weird because normally when you have a baby being crowned, it's because the parents are dead, or usually the father is dead. In this case, father was still okay. He was still alive. Also in the history, when the father is alive and he crowns his co-king, which was a situation that happened in the past, it was usually when the kid was like teenager or something, and they were like, oh, let's rule together, Yeah. But no, in this case, it was very rushed. People were upset about it, and it makes sense because it was very unprecedented, and yeah.
Yeah, because we have some examples like Mary, Queen of Scots, or King James, from the history of England and Scotland, who were crowned like this,
as
but
kids,
but not in this way. But I love that you have prepared this quotation from a chronicle, which is basically contemporary, or it's an old chronicle.
Yeah, it was written somewhat 100 years later.
Yeah, and the historian, or rather the chronicler, because that's a different thing, named Pavel Žídek, sounds like he could be our neighbor.
It sounds today, very like a standard normal Czech name.
Yeah. Well, this is what he wrote. So quote: He meaning Wenceslas, cried terribly and defiled the altar of Saint Maurice at the castle, on which he stood, and he cried until a baker gave him a little cake. Only then did he calm down. That's a fantastic detail. And that baker was granted the privilege to be the sole baker of these cakes until his death. In Nuremberg, he urinated, meaning Wenceslas, not the baker, he urinated into the baptismal font when he was being baptized. And then, I guess, a commentary on his adult self, because this doesn't really sound like a baby. He was a glutton and a drunkard, and he took maidens and ladies without restraint. When he was made incapable of having children, he ordered his courtiers to sin in front of him should he desire it. Oh my God, that's scandalous behavior. Yeah. Urinating in the holy
defecating
water, defecating everywhere, sinning. What an awful guy. Thank you, Pavel Žídek, for telling us all about the awful Wenceslas.
Yeah, it was kind of like a mirror to a monarch, which was a literary genre. That was basically like people were writing like to a monarch, like how to be a proper king. Yeah. And Pavel was doing this for George of Poděbrady, which is a ruler that we get to in future. Yeah. And he used Wenceslas as an example of, okay, this is how horrible Wenceslas was, and like try not to do the same. So please don't shit on altar. And
and George was like, why? I want to though. No, but so this is more of a literary device, possibly, and not exactly, fair and square information about what Wenceslas was actually doing. And even if it was, it's actually like it's on his father, it's his father's fault if he really defecated on the holy altar, because I mean he was a kid, little baby.
Yeah, but it is like I think that is maybe a thing that is definitely worth to point out. We are in a period of time where religious is treated differently than it's now, and all these things are, if you're defecating on the altar, it's like it is something that you're sending. And, you have a child's mind, but at the same time, you're sending some message to God. Yeah. And, if you were a proper good kid, you wouldn't do it because probably God would stop you or something.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, but we've already praised Charles so much, so I think it's worth explaining why he did this, actually, because it had to be clear to him that his toddler son might not be the best in keeping the decorum. So what were the actual immediate political reasons for him to do it?
We mentioned it in the episode, but there were like multiple. I think one of the reasons that we didn't talk about in the main episode is that his mother, Wenceslas's mother, died quite early after his birth, and Charles got married quite quickly afterwards, and he married another woman, and he wanted to coronate her too. But the thing was that I think in his mind he wanted to be sure that the kids that comes from the stepmother are the second in the succession, and that his son is the firstborn, and he's the one that should inherit the kingdom of Bohemia. So he basically did the coronation, and 3 days later, after the toddler coronation, he did the coronation of his second wife. Yeah, it wasn't his second wife; he had multiple wives, but in this case, yeah.
So the message is basically that, you see, my son has the priority here. He was crowned first, and my wife and the children I will have with her are secondary. They are the spares.
Exactly. And which we will talk about next episode, definitely. But there was also like two other reasons. One of them I find quite funny. It's because we were talking about Holy Roman Empire, and he was the emperor, but also he was a king of Bohemia, which were two separate things. But also
we'll get there, don't worry.
Yeah, but it also meant that if you're an emperor, you sometimes write some decrees, and you are like letting your subjects to do some stuff, and he was like basically writing it to himself, which looked a little bit embarrassing.
Oh, great king of Bohemia, in your infinite wisdom. Yeah.
So if you have your son in the name and you write it to your son and not to yourself, it sounds a little bit better.
Yes.
And it's slightly better. I'm sorry, I'm constantly like kicking the microphone. Sorry, my listeners. And
that sounded very monarchic. Like, sorry, my listeners. I mean, they're not yours, Elžbieta.
Our.
They're free people.
Okay. It's like that communist Bugs Bunny. Our listeners. All right, sorry.
Right.
And and there was like a third reason, which was if you are a king of Bohemia, you have an election vote in the order to elect emperor.
Let's go in there. Let's go in there because.
Right?
Thanks for watching. If you'd like to see more, finish this episode, and also, see all the other bonus content that we have, then it would be amazing if you supported us on Patreon, on our Patreon, Bloody Heart of Europe. And yes, it would mean the world to us. So
you can hear the rest of the episode. You can hear about drug lords. You can hear about hemorrhoids. It's definitely worth to check it out. So please go to Patreon.
Yeah, what a sales pitch, Elžbieta. What a sales pitch.